is the Silver and Black Today podcast, your source for Raiders news and information. Now, here's your hosts, swaggering boisterously.
Welcome back, Raider Nation. A short week, or a great week if you want to talk about football. The Raiders off another loss, of course, on Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts at home, but we have special Thursday Night Football. And, of course, Thursday Night Football this week is the Raiders at the 49ers, the Battle of the Bay. Could be the last one, folks. TV's not real excited about it. Both teams with one win, and so not exactly a stellar game. But, hey, I'm Scott Gulbransen. I am the host, founder, and publisher of silverandblacktoday.com and the Silver and Black Today podcast, which was named this year the Nevada Press Association's top podcast of the year. We thank them for that and thank all of you for listening. We also, of course, have our CBS Sports Radio 1140 AM show every Sunday from 8 to 10 a.m. So join us for that. We never skip a beat. So we're going to jump right in since we have the game tomorrow on Thursday against the 49ers. We're going to talk about that. And as always on this podcast, we bring in one of our fan favorites and, of course, our senior NFL writer and columnist, and that is Mr. Hayden Nadolny. Hayden does his popular Any Given Monday column every Monday. Imagine that. On silverandblacktoday.com, which you can catch at 6 a.m. every Monday morning, so you never want to miss that. Hayden, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing very well, thanks, mate. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's it's a crazy time for Raider Nation, but that keeps us busy, so you have to appreciate that, and it works for us too. So let's jump right in first of all and talk a little bit about number one, Derek Carr, because in your column you really focused on Derek Carr this week and kind of the bounce back week that he had, which was phenomenal. You felt, though, that despite the loss, of course, nobody wants to lose, right, Hayden? But despite that, Derek Carr really showed, I think, some moxie here. He really came back after all the trade talks, which turned out not to be much of anything. And, of course, the criticisms from unnamed people in the locker room that were really a lightning rod for controversy last week. He came out and he had a great game.
Yeah, exactly. He had as good a game as I've seen in. Look, I'd go as far to say that that's probably his best performance of the last few years since he broke his leg. I mean, you could say that the Thursday night game last year against Kansas City was another rip snorter from him, but I mean, this was one where he got into a rhythm, he looked comfortable, he really did everything that he could have to win the game. And at the end of the day, he was far from the reason that they lost. And I really think that if Derek Carr plays like that on a consistent basis, the Raiders have their franchise quarterback back. And look, if they've got that back, that's a massive piece of the puzzle that doesn't need fixing. No, absolutely, and you know, there's still ways to go, right? So I have not hidden the fact, Hayden, that I'm a Carr fan, and I think he is the right quarterback. Of course, the way the things have been going for the Raiders and Carr this season, with a complete tear down and rebuild of the team. Then you have to look at that and say, well, geez, you just don't know what's going to happen. So even if Derek Carr performs well and it's not exactly where they want him to be, you never know what can happen. But based on this past week, which is what we're really focused on the podcast today, before they get back to play the 49ers tomorrow on Thursday Night Football, you got to like that, seeing that, though, because to me, not only did you see him do some things from a technical standpoint, which I'll have you talk about as far as stepping up in the pocket and being more aggressive, but also as a leader, someone who was under the gun, and they had a lot of talk swirling about him, about trades, about not being respected in the locker room, and all the things that you don't want when you're a quarterback. To me, that's the really important thing, is despite all that negativity that was thrown his way, he bounced back not only physically and from a football on the field perspective, but also as a leader. No, exactly. If you look at it, the tables really were against Carr going into this game. There had been so much media talk and so much speculation. And the speculation wasn't, I guess, even through the media. It was also additionally through the locker room as well. Like, people aren't going to deny that there have been rumblings going on, questioning whether he was the guy. And for him to come out and deliver that kind of performance, it really was one of those moments that could be defining going forward. Now, it's a little bit hyperbolic to be saying that right now, but if there's going to be a turning point, this is the moment that we will look back on and say, okay, this is where it started.
Yeah, that's a great point. So now, when you look at what this game was like for Derek Carr, I mean, one of the things that we heard and we talked about in previous podcasts was the fact that Carr was just not going downfield, right? So against the Seahawks in London, which was, of course, just a disaster of a game, he had one pass over 10 yards. Now, against the Colts, it wasn't like he was going long every time, but he did have double that, almost 6 passes over 10 yards, and he completed 3 of those, 2 of which were for touchdowns. What did you see about him looking downfield and finding receivers downfield that we hadn't seen before?
We simply had more time on the offense from the offensive line. It's that simple. Against Seattle, he had no time at all, and they were just trying to get out of the game healthy. It was 3 drops the whole time. And if you look at what happened against the Colts, he just had so much more time. Colton Miller, once again, is healthy, and look, he looks like a decent rookie tackle again. And John Feliciano, he really stepped up. Brandon Parker and Gabe Jackson, they were able to handle on the right side tackle and end stunts that were coming their way. Chris Reed, our colleague at Silver and Black Today, he did a great video analysis of that on Twitter today, just posting a few things about how the line is looking so much better than it was previously. And that's just because they're getting healthy again. It's that simple. And when Carr has time to throw, we have all seen that he is one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And that showed on Sunday.
Right, and it's funny because as I bring in Matt Gutierrez later on this podcast, I know you won't be on for that, but Matt and I got in a heated argument on our CBS Sports Radio show on last Sunday because his point of view was much more that it was Derek Carr's issue and not as much the offensive line. Where I said no, in London with that beat up offensive line, and does Derek Carr still need to improve at things? Absolutely. There's still some confidence building there. There's still some, I think, physical things that need to come around and he needs to be confident about. But at the same time, I said if you watch the film, and again, our buddy Chris Reed did a piece on this 2 weeks ago where he showed how the Raiders' offensive line in the Seahawks game was just ridiculous. I mean, John Feliciano whiffed on 3 blocks that ended up being pressures or sacks, and so you can't do that and protect your quarterback, especially a guy who has been injured and needs the time to be able to throw, especially in that offense. So that is good news to see that offensive line bounce back. I mean, that's what you want to see off a bye week, right? You want to see a win, of course, but to see them get healthier, right? I don't think they're fully healthy, but they are better than they were 2 weeks previous. And that's a big thing because I think that despite the fact that everybody's now wanting the Raiders to win somewhat, but then also be in a position to get, a top 3 draft pick if they can, or at least top 5, it makes it more difficult, I think, for fans to think about what they want to root for. But I said all along, Hayden, I just want to see consistent progress, and I really believe that in that Colts game, the loss was much easier to swallow because you did see improvement in key areas.
Oh, you saw improvement massively in certain areas. I mean, the offensive line is going to make the whole offense go. It really is that simple. And if they give Derek Carr time to throw, he's going to be able to get the receivers involved. And I mean, no Amari Cooper, and that wasn't a problem on the weekend. So, and look at who the receivers were. I mean, Martavis Bryant only played 7 snaps. Then you had Brandon LaFell, who hasn't played all season. Jordy Nelson, who, look, I don't think he's anywhere near the player he was a few years ago. And Derek Carr was still able to move the chains, get a rhythm going, and he looked every bit the franchise quarterback that the Raiders could have hoped for. So the big thing that it's going to come down to is, can they develop the defense? I mean, because really, when it boils down to it, you can score 30 points a game, but if you're giving up 35, well, you're not going to win many, are you?
No, and that continues to be the biggest issue is the defense, which has been, I think, a big subject this week for most people who write about or talk about the Raiders, because that's the reason they lost. There were certainly some offensive miscues that could have led to more points, and who knows what would have happened. But you're absolutely right. But I want to touch back on the wide receivers for a second, because I agree with you. Sure. At the same time, I thought Martavis Bryant. 7 snaps only, but in those 7 snaps, he served as a decoy, I think, effectively 2 times, and then the third time had a key block. So, of course, you want him to be that bird. You want him to be that guy who's going to go downfield for you. But in a game where they had just had an upheaval with Amari Cooper going to Dallas, it was nice to see him at least play a role and seemingly do it willingly.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's also in large part because they don't trust him.
Right.
And they don't want to give him a bigger role. They know that Brandon LaFell is a veteran. He is quarterback friendly to a degree. I mean, you look at everywhere he's gone, he's had roughly anywhere between 500 and 800 yards receiving in a season when he's played a full year. So you know that you're going to get a decent amount of production out of him. He's not going to be great, but he's going to be someone that the quarterback can rely on. And at this stage, given what they are trying to get out of Derek Carr, which is progression, they can't have any more mental mistakes, because that just leads to turnovers. And that just leads to more problems, especially when you need near perfection for a defense that is absolute rubbish at the moment. Yeah. No, and we saw Tuesday's trade deadline pass. I just want to get a couple thoughts from you on that one. It was an interesting day when we saw Ty Montgomery, after his snafu, if you want to call it that, or his just FU to his coach last week against the Rams. He was traded, of course, and that was pretty. I mean, there was nothing really surprising that happened. The big surprise, I think, for a lot of people was the Raiders did not get anything else done. I was not surprised by it. I felt like, well, geez, Bruce Irvin might have some value, but clearly they either no one had any interest, or if they did have any interest, they weren't willing to pay any price that the Raiders were doing. I think everybody thought, Hayden, that because Amari Cooper brought in a number 1 pick from Dallas, which everyone sort of thought was overpaying. I don't. He's a first-round draft pick. He's only 23 years old. But I think that a lot of teams looked at that and asked for a lot more, and so that probably killed some deals for other teams and for the Raiders. You're 100% spot on there. If you look at the Amari Cooper deal, they say, look, sure, he's on a rookie contract, but he's getting close to $14 million next year on his so-called rookie deal. So it's hardly a sound investment when it comes to trying to justify, oh, well, he's on a rookie deal, so it looks better. No. He's on a very nice contract next year. So, sure, getting a first-round pick for him was an absolute steal in the circumstances. And, yeah, you're exactly right. That did inflate all the other prices. We did see a few trades from left field. I mean, Clinton Dix going to Washington. I thought that was a really good trade. We saw the Rams trade for Dante Fowler. They gave a little bit more than I imagined, a 3rd rounder and a 5th rounder. Demaryius Thomas is now out of the AFC West. He's gone to Houston, who ironically play the Broncos on Sunday, so that's going to be a weird dynamic there. But look, when it comes to the Raiders, they tried to move some guys on and there were no takers, and I think that says a lot about the roster right now. When you're trying to dump off your better players or so-called names on the roster and you still can't get rid of them for a packet of chips, essentially, some steak knives, well, you know that there's a problem. No
doubt. And I think, one of the things, too, that struck me was that we had heard a lot of talk about Garyon Conley. Now, Conley played a lot during Sunday's loss against the Colts. He had a couple miscues that ended up burning him, but he also looked, I think, solid at times. And I was glad, I don't know about you, I want to get your opinion, I was glad to see him not go, because I really believe that he needs to be given the opportunity through the rest of the season to do that. I mean, he hasn't played that much, and he is a talented athlete. Do you agree with me? You're glad that you didn't see him go?
Oh, I said in my column of Any Given Monday this week that if they traded him for anything less than a first rounder, it would be an egregious mistake. And I still believe that today. So getting Connolly and keeping him was an essential thing that the organization needed to do. I mean, if you fix his tackling technique, which I certainly think is more than fixable at this stage. I mean, he's only, 23 years old.
Right.
He can develop, he can improve. His cover skills are very good. He can be a very good starter in this league. I'm not sure if he can be like an impact corner, but he's certainly going to be, at the very least, a top number 2 corner in the league. And at this stage, when you've got him on a low first round rookie contract, you're going to have him contracted for the next 3 years. You're going to be able to see some good stuff coming out from Gary Connolly in the future.
Well, one of the things that we'll talk about too, Hayden, is you talk a lot about in Any Given Monday, almost every Monday, or at least majority of the columns you've done this season, a little bit about special teams and particularly punter Johnny Townsend, who has really underwhelmed, and I think that's being positive, at punter. And meanwhile, the Raiders went out and I think made a great signing of Daniel Carlson to be their place kicker. Carlson, of course, Minnesota Vikings had a really bad day and got cut after missing a game-winning field goal. What would have been a game-winning field goal? And I think he's actually a good kicker, and I predicted this weekend that he would be with the Raiders for the next several years, because I really do think the guy is talented. Now, on the punting side, Johnny Townsend, what do? They're going to have to wait this out the rest of the year, or you think there might be a change, seeing that the Raiders aren't going anywhere, they're not going to make the playoffs?
You know, I should give my phone number to Jon Gruden, because he can call me and I'll do a better job than Johnny Townsend. All right, it's that simple. Johnny Townsend is the worst punter in the league, and it's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
He shanks 50% of his kicks. You know, the Raiders, all they need to do is they need to be able to have someone who can reliably kick at least 40 yards. You know, punt the field, flip the field at least 40 net yards, and they're going to be okay. But with Johnny Townsend, they're lucky to get a 25-yard punt half the time. So it really means that the field gets flipped in the wrong direction. It means that the defense has poor field position. It means that the opposition offense has less yards that they need to go down the field to score. And when the Raiders' defense needs to be near perfect, to have any chance of even stopping teams. They don't have the talent, so they need to do, in terms of their assignments, they need to be perfect in that aspect, and we're not seeing that. So when you're giving less play, less yardage for the defense to give up, it's a massive detriment to the entire team. And really, that was the punt. Johnny Townsend's 25-yard punt after the Raiders went 3 and out in the fourth quarter. That was the thing that changed the game. Forget Doug Martin's fumble.
Yeah.
That punt was the thing that changed the game. And I really don't understand why Gruden is doubling down on Townsend again. He said, we're not giving up on Johnny Townsend. The only reason that I can see that they're not giving up on Johnny Townsend right now is because Gruden has been so critical of draft picks made by Reggie McKenzie, and for him to be cutting a 5th-round pick in his first year would be seen maybe not too good from a PR perspective. That's the only reason that I can see that he's still on the roster at this point.
No, yeah, exactly, because kickers, and we just mentioned Daniel Carlson, they're new and at least temporary or maybe permanent, who knows, place kicker, in that kickers get cut every week, right? I mean, if somebody has a bad week or somebody's not up to snuff, they very quickly find themselves on the unemployment line. So it would not be surprising, and it usually happens that way. So the fact that they haven't done it, I agree with you. There has to be something more at play there. So what I know you called in the column, the 49er Raider game, it's going to be a snooze fest is what you called it, actually. But now we're hearing CJ Beathard, the 49ers starting quarterback, may not play due to a hand injury, which sort of changes things. I think it makes the game. I really felt that the only game that the Raiders would have a chance to win the rest of the way would be against the Cardinals on November 18th. But now with this new development, and if Beathard doesn't go, because we're getting conflicting signals, he says he's going, then the team says he's not, the Raiders could end up pulling out a win in probably their last game in San Francisco as a member of the Bay Area Football Club.
Yeah, I think the Raiders are going to win on Thursday night. If you've got what's his name? Nick Mullins is the third string quarterback for San Francisco. He's never even played a regular season snap. So seriously, if the Raiders defense can't shut down Nick Mullins, I don't want to do any hot takes here, but seriously, Jon Gruden's just he'd be a walking time bomb after that.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
It's ridiculous. If they can't beat a third string quarterback who's never played down in this league on a short week, so the quarterback has less time to prepare, and okay, so the Raiders have less time to prepare as well, but they don't have to travel anywhere. They don't have the difficulties with having a road game to prepare for. They get to prepare for it like it was a home game. So both sides are equal in that regard. It's that simple. If you've got Derek Carr lining up against Nick Mullins, it's a no-brainer.
No doubt. Well, we'll see how it goes on Thursday. Hayden, as always, thank you for joining us, man. And we always tell you, make sure you go read Hayden's column any given Monday on silverandblacktoday.com. But also, Hayden writes a bunch of other stuff, too, and usually previews the games with 3 things to watch, which people love as well. So make sure you do that. Hayden, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure, Scott. Have a good night.
All right. That was Hayden Nadolny, our senior NFL writer and columnist for Silver and Black Today. Silver and Black Today. He also contributes here on the podcast, obviously, regularly, as he does as well on our CBS Sports radio show. We're going to step aside for a message, and when we come back, we're going to be joined by my usual co-host, and that is, of course, Matt Gutierrez. He's part of the Silver and Black Today team on CBS Sports Radio. We'll talk a little more about the 49ers and also about the trade deadline. You're listening to Silver and Black Today podcast. We'll be back right after this.
The Southern Nevada Laborers will give you the skills and knowledge to become part of a workforce that's strong and committed. Call Southern Nevada Laborers at 452-9410 to get the training you need for a better future. We offer courses that will put you on the right track. Our cutting-edge instruction will keep you on top where you belong. Become highly skilled and highly valuable. Become a proud union laborer. Southern Nevada Laborers, 452-9410. Call today.
All right, welcome back to the Silver and Black Today podcast. I'm Scott Gulbransen, and we go back out on the phones now, and we bring in my partner, co-host, Matt Gutierrez. How you doing tonight, Matt?
Doing good, man. How you doing?
Good. Well, here we are. It's Wednesday, so tomorrow is Thursday Night Football. The Raiders get back on the field for the second time in less than a week. In a year where they've only won one game, that might not be looked at as a positive, right? But they actually have a shot at this game against the 49ers now. But I want to talk to you first, before we talk about a little bit about the game tomorrow night, then the big national game. Let's talk about the trade deadline. Now, we had talked about on our CBS Sports Radio show on Sunday that we thought that some guys could be moved. We thought Garyon Conley might be one of those. We thought Bruce Irvin might be one of those, Carl Joseph. None of those guys were left. Why do you think that is?
To be honest with you, I wonder if it's just a little bit of they didn't hold enough value. I mean, let's be honest. They got out there and they finally played, but it's not like they were impressive. They had their moments. You see that Carl Joseph can still hit with the best of them, but he still seems to get lost a little bit and got burned for a touchdown. Garyon Conley had a pass breakup, only allowed a few catches, not a ton of yards, but again, just not always in the best position. So maybe they just didn't impress enough on tape that the Raiders were going to get back as much as they probably wanted for those guys. Those are 2 first-round picks. I'm sure they were looking for not first round in compensation, but something quality.
Yeah, and I for one am glad that Garyon Conley was not traded. I think that the jury's still out. I think you have to give the kid some opportunity to play. He got burned one big time on Sunday when they lost to the Colts, but he also played well. He had one pass defense that I thought was really well. He played it well. You can see improvement on certain plays, and then, of course, he regresses a little bit, but that's what you would expect of, in essence, what is a rookie. So I'm glad they did. Same with Joseph. Joseph, I agree with you. I just didn't think there was a lot of value. And then Bruce Irvin, clearly no one thought enough of him to offer. I'm sure the Raiders would have taken a low-round draft pick to get him or to get rid of him. and nobody bid on that. Does that surprise you at all with his inconsistency this year?
No, because I feel like Bruce Irvin has completely checked out of this season. You remember his comments about his wife and going home and doing whatever it is he does. Oh, yeah. That speaks to character right there. It's not about on-field production at this point. It's about character. And you're supposed to be one of the veteran leaders on this defense, and a month into the season, you've essentially let everybody know that you have completely checked out of this season. And if you're a GM for another team and you're looking at that, you have to think to yourself, is he worth bringing in here if we start to struggle a little bit? Is this going to be the guy that we get now?
Yeah, and clearly there were some teams who could have used some edge rusher help. And Irvin, he didn't play a lot on Sunday in the Colts loss, and so that also said to me that really they weren't getting any phone calls, and they might have gotten a couple cursory calls from what we've heard, but nothing that was going to move the needle. And at the end of the day, there probably wasn't any value there as well. But I'll tell you too, Matt, I think that there were some trades that we talked, and Hayden and I talked about it earlier in the show. There were some trades on Tuesday that were good. I mean, HaHa Dix was traded, and Clinton Dix, and then he was a guy that you thought. Ty Montgomery, not surprising, he kind of sealed his own fate last Sunday against the Rams when he decided to just tell his coach to F off and do what he wanted to do.
Stop. Hold on with that real quick. Have you ever seen? I mean, because we see situations, and I mean, let's go right to Bruce Irvin. We see situations in the NFL where it looks like guys have completely checked out, or they're defiant, just completely defiant, and I don't care what you say. And teams tend to roll with it. Teams tend to try to bring them along and get them back into the fold. Have you ever seen a team that just said, you know what, to hell with this, you're gone, man. Yeah. You're not going to pay attention to us. You're not going to do what we want you to do, and you ultimately cost us a shot at winning this game. You're gone.
Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing, and you have to, right? Because you go back to several weeks ago when we talked to former GM Michael Lombardi, he said that, right? He said, look, you can't have guys on your team if they're openly going to defy the organization. And I'm not talking about contract holdouts, that's a little different. But if you're going to have somebody openly defy the coach on the field during a huge game, you can't keep them around, because what does that tell everybody else, right? So it wasn't surprising. But I thought, the Rams, Dante Fowler, right? What a great acquisition for them. They get better. I think they have like 7 first-round draft picks now on their defense. Is anybody going to stop them?
No, they're ridiculous. That's the most absurd thing I've ever seen. I can't believe they got Fowler on that line. That team they're pretty much stacked at every position. I don't know that they have a weakness at this point. And when they get completely healthy, I mean, they're already undefeated. Man, who's going to beat them? Now, I don't think they're going to run the table, because that's a difficult thing to do. And even the Patriots, as great as they were that year, and they ran the table in the regular season, they still fell in the Super Bowl. That is a difficult thing to do in the NFL. It only takes 1 or 2 crazy plays for things to go against you. But I mean, this is a 15-1 at worst 14-2 team at this point.
Yeah, and from an AFC West perspective, and for Raider fans, we say goodbye to Demaryius Thomas, who's now with the Houston Texans. So that was a good move, I think, for the Raiders to get a guy out of the division. Is always a nice thing, but not much going on with the Raiders, of course. We had a little bit of a move with the Raiders, right, today with a retirement.
Rogers Cromartie.
Rogers Cromartie, yep.
Retires. I mean, I thought he retired before this last game.
That's why I asked you the question.
A single snap.
You tweeted it out earlier on Tuesday, and I needed you to say it on here because it was funny.
Yeah, I mean, he was a last second add to this team. It was kind of hey, we're trying to fill as many holes as we can. Who's available? Oh, Dominic Rogers Cromartie's available. Let's bring him in here. And that's zero impact, in my opinion. Are the Raiders going to miss him? No. Were they better with him? No. Are they going to be worse without him? No. He's a zero impact guy at this point in his career, in my opinion. And he probably he felt maybe he could come to a team that had potential. Jon Gruden's here. You've got some big names on both sides of the ball. Maybe we'll be able to do something. And instead, it's a complete dumpster fire and clearly a rebuild, or whatever you want to call it. And he's done. He's had enough. He doesn't want to go through this anymore. He didn't come back to play on the worst team in the NFL. He came back to win games. And if you're not having fun and you're at the end of your career anyways, go for it.
Yeah, and of course, publications like Deadspin used it as another way to get a shot in on the Raiders and saying that he'd rather retire than playing for the Raiders. But yeah, there was just no impact there, and he wasn't going to get snaps anyway, so makes sense. And you get to that point in your career, I think that's not indicative of what's happening on the team. I think it was just a guy who'd reached the end of it, was given an opportunity by Jon Gruden and team, but just couldn't cut it out. So that's just the way it goes. But I didn't think the Raiders would be very active in either selling and obviously not buying. But let's talk a little bit about what we saw on Sunday, Matt, since you and I went off the air at 10 a.m. on Sunday, and that was the game against the Colts. Now, to me, the most encouraging thing, two of the most encouraging things were the offensive line, which had been battered and thin, played much, much better. Are they a top unit or even a midweight? No, but they played a lot better. They gave Derek Carr more time, and Derek Carr took advantage of that, didn't he?
Well, yeah, you give him a week off. You let guys like Miller heal up, and he's playing on whatever's going on with his knee. Whether it's meniscus or sprained MCL or whatever they said it was. You give him time to heal up, and he's going to look better. I think, honestly, I feel like the line played with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder this week. There was a lot of rumblings in the locker room. You saw the video with Lee Smith, the interview that he had, where he called it complete BS about Derek Carr not being strong enough. Not being a tough guy, not being a locker room leader, things of that nature. And I think they stood up for their guy. I think they said, look, Derek Carr is our guy. That's our quarterback, not to steal a line from T.O., but that's my quarterback. And they wanted to show people that, you know what, if we give this kid time, he's still a good quarterback. And you saw 17 out of 17 in a row he completed. Unfortunately, number 18 was on a third down and stalled out a drive that could have helped them out a lot, but that game wasn't on Derek Carr at all. He looked phenomenal. He looked like the Derek Carr that everybody expects him to be. But, you give Derek Carr time and allow him to see the field cleanly, and he's going to make plays. Unfortunately, he hasn't had that opportunity this season. And little by little, he's going to work himself into this offense, and hopefully that familiarity with it will help things as well.
Yeah, Matt, and if you go back to the debacle that was the London game against Seattle, Derek Carr had 2 passes attempted over 10 yards. In this game against the Colts on Sunday, he had 6. He completed 3 of them, 2 of which were for touchdowns. So not only did he have the time to do it, but the play calling from Jon Gruden, instead of the little 5-yard outs that they basically gave up in that game against the Seahawks and just started saying, screw it, we're just going to throw 5-yard out passes the rest of the game, they actually went downfield and they got new guys involved. With Amari Cooper now, Brandon LaFell steps up, you have Seth Roberts step up again. Martavis Bryant only played 7 snaps, Matt, but he blocked. He was out there as a decoy, and I thought, they don't trust him enough to be the guy, right, Martavis Bryant? But at the same time, he played the role, and he seemingly played it with and relished the fact that he was helping his team.
Yeah, you go back to London and look at the type of throws that Derek Carr had, and I know you talk about time, and he didn't have a lot of time in the pocket and things like that, but there were throws that he made the other day that were under a second from the time he got the ball to the time it came out of his hand, and it still went vertically. Vertical doesn't have to be the Air Coryell days with the Chargers and the Al Davis throwing it 70 yards down the field kind of offense. It just means you have to go down the field, whether it's 15 yards, 10 yards, slants over the middle, seam routes, things like that. And those don't take long to develop as long as you can get a clean release off the line of scrimmage. The problem is Derek Carr wasn't even willing to look that way in London. Whether they were there or not, he refused to even look. It was automatic look to the flat. The other day, he looked for those guys, and the ball was still coming out quick. It's not like he held on to it for too long at all. The ball was coming out when it needed to come out, but he was more willing to spread it around. And you can call it play calling. Maybe it was. Maybe Jon Gruden decided, you know what, let's get some other guys involved. But Derek Carr was willing to spread the ball around to his offensive weapons. It wasn't just the Jalen Richard show and let's only go to Jared Cook. He really spread the ball around to everybody.
No, he did. And what does it say too? And again, I want to preface it by saying that I think Amari Cooper is going to do fine in Dallas. I think he's a good young player. I mean, he's only 23 years old, for Christ's sake. But at the same time, what does it say that Amari's gone And the offense, I mean, again, back to the point, they had time. He had time to throw. Carr had time to throw. But it just seemed like that team was a little more cohesive, and that maybe the tension, it might not have been a bad locker room or any of that kind of stuff, because I don't think Amari Cooper's that kind of guy. But just the tension there wasn't probably good for either the player or the team. And so now them both going their separate ways with the trade to Dallas, I think it's done them both well.
Yeah, and I don't know if tension's the right word, but maybe just an uneasy feeling of what's going to happen next. You know,
that's a good point. Yeah,
you can call it tension, but it's just this uneasiness. Am I going to go? Is he going to go? Who's going to be here tomorrow? What's going to happen? They already got rid of Mack. They're talking about Carr. What's going to happen? And I think once the Cooper trade happened, maybe it kind of settled everybody down, and everybody said, "Okay, I think we're done now. We've got all these first-round draft picks stockpiled. Let's just go out and play football and not worry about that." And I'm sure the bye week had a lot to do with that. Kind of gave everybody a chance to just decompress a little bit and get ready for the next game. But yeah, it had to be weighing heavy on everybody's minds. And now that that's done, the trade deadline is gone. We'll see what they do tomorrow night against San Francisco. I mean, it's not like they're playing a juggernaut by any stretch. This is a 1-6 versus a 1-7 team. There's no reason they can't go out and win this game other than the fact that they just haven't been playing good football. Yeah,
the 49ers have been really a train wreck since about 2003, 2004, after, you know, they had the years with Harbaugh, which went really well, and then you look at the point, I mean, it's been a tough break for the Bay Area when it comes to football, pro football, over the last several years. I mean, 13 out of the last 16 seasons for the 49ers have been miserable, and the Raiders, everyone knows that story. So this game, I think, you know, everybody's looking at it as an opportunity to get some positive and right the ship for both of their teams. And now, as we mentioned earlier, as you came on, the Raiders are going to be facing a third-string quarterback never started in the league. This might be the time for the Raiders to really start to build a little bit of confidence. I still think, though, Matt, that the only other game they probably have a chance to win is the Cardinal game. But at least you're able to now see guys, and that's what I think Raider fans need to do, right? You hope that they can win the game, but overall, shouldn't we be watching guys just to see how they perform, to see who's going to be part of that rebuilding model going into next season?
You know, it's funny because you can look at this at two different ways. On one side of it, you go, I hate losing. I want to see my team win. You know, just get out there and play good football and bring a win to Oakland. And on the other side, you go, man, if they lose, they're sitting with the number 2 pick right now, just one spot behind the Giants.
Right.
So, you know, but I don't think anybody in that locker room or anybody in that coaching staff or anybody in that front office is going to put their pride aside and just accept losing. Understand that they are rebuilding and they are looking towards the future, but they still want to go out and win football games. You still want to go out and prove to people that you have pieces there that you can build around in the future. Now, is it going to be against San Francisco? I don't know. San Francisco isn't terrible when it comes to scoring, with the exception of the other night. Oakland hasn't been able to score at all. San Francisco scoring about 21 points a game. You know, the Raiders were just below that, a couple points below that, and only one of those games really brought that average up. You take out that Cleveland game, they were scoring 13 points a game. So, you know, I would give the edge being in San Francisco to the 49ers, but you might have a brand new quarterback starting for these guys. You've got the injury, the wrist injury with
CJ Beathard.
CJ Beathard. So you might get Nick Mueller in there starting his first NFL game.
Yeah. And that, to me, I mean, especially against a beleaguered and just, let's face it, just flat out awful defense for the Raiders. And let's talk about that, Matt, and the rest of the time we have together, because it's hard to look at this defense because everyone was really excited when Paul Guenther came in. And if you look at and I even saw some people this week write about, hey, look, this defense, I'm watching this defense under Jack Del Rio last year, and as soon as they switched from Ken Norton Jr. to John Pagano, things got a little better, and you had Navarro Bowman, and things look okay, and you had Khalil Mack. But in reality, I don't think they were very good last year. They did improve with a scheme change, But then you trade Khalil Mack. That was the big domino on the defensive side. But overall, the linebacking core, very hit and miss. The younger guy, I want to see the younger guys play. I think Tahir Whitehead needs to be benched and put aside. I just don't think he's consistent enough to do anything. Meanwhile, Nick Morrow and some of these other guys are really trying their best to make this team and stay with this team as they rebuild. And then the defensive backfield is an up and down situation. I mean, what could we look for from this defense for the rest of the year?
Well, I mean, go back to the summer when we're looking at, OTAs and heading towards training camp, and we thought, all right, Khalil Mack and Bruce Irvin on the ends, and then you've got young guys like Arden Key coming in behind them and Tank Carradine, and you've got some depth there finally. And then in the middle, you've got Justin Ellis, and now you've got Mo Hurst and PJ Hall that are coming in behind them. So you've got some more depth there. And then you go to the linebacking core, and you've got these young guys. You bring in Derek Johnson. He's going to be a leader, stable guy. He can cover. All of these things, and I mean, even in the secondary, Gary Connolly's finally going to be on the field. You've got Nelson there that can play. You've got, let's see what Carl Joseph can do now. None of that happened. You get rid of Mack. Bruce Irvin doesn't want to play. Justin Ellis is injured. Derek Johnson's gone. The young linebackers have been a disaster. Nobody in the secondary can play. Carl Joseph and Gary Connolly finally got on the field last week. Nothing that we expected from this defense is even on the field up until this last week. I mean, it's been such a train wreck from what we all thought we were going to see back over the summer to what it actually has been.
Yes.
At this point, just let the kids play. I mean, there's really no harm in allowing that to happen. Reggie Nelson's done. We know that. There's no point in showcasing him anymore. Just let these guys get out there and get reps. You might have Vanderdos back this week, if not next week. Justin Ellis back in the next few weeks, hopefully. That's what they're saying. So at least you can start to work these guys in. It's not like Vanderdos has had a lot of time. Last year was his rookie season, and he got injured towards the end of the year. Let these guys get in there and play, and then see what you have and build around it. They need to go linebacker in this draft. They need help at linebacker, maybe more than anywhere else on that entire team.
No, it's a good point, because I think that's one of the things when we all. It's funny when you look back at it, right? You're talking about when on our CBS Sports show and on this podcast and on the website during OTAs and during training camp. I think we all said, "Wow, they went out and they're signing these rent-a-vets, and not all of them will work out. But geez, even if half of them work out, they're going to be much better than they were last year." But guess what? None of them worked out. I mean, none of them worked out. Tahir Whitehead's had some okay weeks, but I think you see now, middle of the season, he's starting to tail off more, which tells me he just might be done. And so you're right. You have to let these young guys play. And up front, I think the play of Hurst and Hall, particularly, is being overshadowed because they don't have help anywhere else. If you might have a good push up the middle where those guys are, but you got nothing coming off the edge. You got nobody at linebacker, and then if they throw the ball downfield, guess what happens? So to me, that's the biggest disappointment is none of the free agents really have panned out. Even Rashawn Melvin and some of these guys in the defensive backfield, who I thought would be much better than they are, they're role players and they do okay, but none of them have been, I think, the leader to take some of those young guys to the next step. Especially, it's just not materialized.
Right, and you look at Hall and Hurst, and I think these two guys. Let's say Nick Mullins does get the start. I think those two guys can have a big game, and not necessarily on pressures and sacks and things, because we know how horrible the Raiders are in that department. They're last in the league, and it's not even close. They're 50 some odd pressures away from where Detroit is. I mean, it's bad. Detroit is the second worst team in the NFL in that category. But these two guys are really good at pushing people and getting their hands up. And if Mullins starts, he's a smaller guy. He's a Baker Mayfield sized quarterback. And you saw how well this team did against Baker Mayfield in just creating havoc, just making it difficult for him to find clean passing lanes and get the ball up. They generated 5 turnovers. Maybe with another first start quarterback coming in, guy that's relatively similar in size, 6'1" guy, maybe they can generate enough, get their hands in some passing lanes, and disrupt some things with this team.
Yeah, it was interesting too, Matt. I don't know if you had the chance yet to see Jon Gruden's early week press conference. A really subdued Jon Gruden. He was really, really, I think, back on his heels, if you want to say it that way, at least. Very subdued, but at the same time, he was sort of, I think, playing again with the media in a way. And I'm just wondering, what do you think about where Jon Gruden is? I mean, clearly, any coach, especially a coach with all this attention on him as Gruden has had, as he's been lured time after time after time to come out of the booth and go to coaching. What do you think? What do you think this is like for Jon Gruden now? What do you think we're going to see from him the rest of the year?
I think Jon Gruden always had an idea of what he wanted to do with this team. I think his entire idea was to come in and make it his team. What I don't think is I don't think that he realized just how little he had as far as personnel goes on this roster, especially when you start getting rid of guys like Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper. I think the process is maybe is going to take a little longer than he had hoped it would take. And as far as that subdued kind of feel that you got from him the other day, the Raiders didn't play a bad game. Defensively, they weren't great at all. But they did not play a bad game. They were up 28-21 in the fourth quarter and looked like they had that game in control, and they still lost 42-28. If you're Jon Gruden, you got to be sitting there going, man, we played a really good game. Offensively, we looked great. We scored 28 points, second highest total we scored all season. Guys were flying around to the ball. Things were clicking, and we still got blown out at home. That has to be extremely humbling for a guy who only wants to win. Jon Gruden is a football guy, first and foremost. All he wants to do is win. And to go out there and play, that well, relatively speaking, and still get blown out on your home field has got to be extremely frustrating and humbling for a guy like that.
No doubt. And Jon Gruden, as we know, because we play clips on our shows all the time, Matt, he loves to spar spryly with the media, right? He likes to give it back to him, and he likes to, make comments. But when you're 1-6, you can't really do that anymore, right? Because you're just awful. So there's nothing you can argue or fight against. So I think he's reserved to the fact that, I'm not going to fight that battle. If I was 8-8, or if I was 3-3 or 4-3 or something like that, and the media's given me some shade, I can go back at them. But for Gruden now, I think he's employing a really good strategy again, which I think he's been doing all along, by the way, is to say, look, you want to beat me up? Yeah, terrible. I know. Yeah, I wish we could do better for the I mean, you disarm, right? You disarm the media by basically agreeing with them, and then they can't really blow that up because you're agreeing with them.
Yeah, what pushback do you have at this point? No, we're headed in the right direction. Guys are getting better. Like, what can you say at this point? You're giving up 350 to 400 yards a game through the air. You're giving up 100 plus on the ground. Teams are scoring 35 points against you. There's really not much you can say at this point other than, we'll come out next week and see if we can fix things. I mean, that's really all you got left at this point.
No, and I think Jon Gruden could come out of last week's game against the Colts and say, listen, you saw the vision I have for offense. This is what we're going to do on offense. And it works. You know what? If we execute, and our guys do what they're supposed to do, the offensive line, the quarterback, the receivers running routes, running backs running the ball and hopefully not fumbling, then we're...
And your boy, Scott.
Hey, he was doing well up until that point. Surprisingly, he even surprised me. But he can look at that and say, you can see now, and I think this is where from the offense's perspective, you might still lose a lot more games this year, but if I'm that offense, I think that's going to start help, especially if they can come out, and they should have a good game against the 49ers. They can really, I think, start to develop that camaraderie in that offense because it's working, right? If you can you got to string games together, of course. You can't just do one and then go back and take 5 steps backwards. But that's a big deal. Now, on defense is just, you got to write it off. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You got to play kids and see what happens. So for Jon Gruden on that side of the ball, as you said, Matt, it's all about the draft. They're going to need some offensive players as well, but I agree with you. I think that they're going to have to go all defense. In fact, all three picks in the first round should be defense. There's no question about it, because the defense is beyond bad. And to get 3 impact players in the first round next year in the 2019 draft is exactly what they need, because what you'd like to see, right, next year. We talked about this on the show, right? That they might win a 3 or 4 game season again next year. But if you can get impact players and sneak a game here and two, win 5 or 6 games, okay, then you're back to the road of getting closer to respectability, so that when you get to Vegas, you're at least an 8-8 team, and maybe even if you pull off some magic, you might be in contention for a wild card or something like that.
They have to hit. They have to hit on the draft. So they're not going to attract any top free agents for 2019. They're going to have to overpay for whoever it is they bring in, or they're going to bring in bottom tier guys that are essentially just going to fill holes for the season and fill out the 53-man roster. Coming to Vegas, though, it's an attractive thing. You're in a brand new market. You're in Las Vegas. State tax, brand new stadium, brand new facilities. Everything is brand new, and it's the Raiders. So I think there's an allure there. So that's when you need to go after some top guys. What you need to do is in this 2019 draft and then in the 2020 draft, you have to hit. You can't afford to miss on any of these guys. They have to be more diligent than they've ever been in scouting talent coming out of college, because they now have 5 first-round picks, and who knows what else they're going to accumulate over the next 6 months. 5 first-round picks heading into the next 2 drafts. If they miss on those, then it was all for naught. Yeah. And this rebuild just got set back another 2 or 3 years. If they can hit on those and they can hit on a few free agents, then 2020 could be a decent season. If they don't hit on it and they can't get decent free agents, it's 2022, 2023 before you're looking at a team that's competitive again.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's going to be hard. I mean, like you said, and we've said all along, having that many draft picks is good, but then what do you do with them? Who knows? My guess is 2019, all 3 of those number ones they're going to keep. But you never know. If somebody comes and offers a trade and you get a quality player that's a frontline player, you might do it. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. And clearly this year, though, you got to start to find out about guys like Garyon Conley. You have to start to find out about guys like Vander Does. You have to find out about guys that are on that borderline.
Because you look at it and what position group on the defense is good?
None.
At this point.
0.
You don't have one. You have
the middle.
Mo Hurst is a good player.
Yeah.
Mo Hurst is going to be good. But is the defensive interior good? No. It's not. Linebacking core, terrible. Ends, terrible. Secondary, terrible. They have so many holes to fill.
They do.
And hopefully with all of these picks they've stockpiled, they'll be able to start to fill those.
Well, and they may end up trading one of those ones down so they can get more players. I mean, because that's the bottom line. You can get good players in the 2nd and 3rd round as well. And so if you can get rid of a number 1 in the top 15 and get a couple number 2s or a number 3, something like that, then you might think about doing it, because you're right. They need bodies. It's either that or you do the rent-a-vet again like they did this year and just hope that you're more successful at picking guys that'll have some impact. But I still love Ed Oliver. He's a defensive tackle, but we'll see what happens the rest of the year, right? If Hurst and Hall and Vander Does come back, and he can play well and show some spark, and they play well as a unit and perform, then maybe you might still need somebody there, but maybe you don't get an Ed Oliver. Instead, like you said, you go for a linebacker. So it's going to be interesting. I think that's the tough thing if you're a Raider fan out there, is you want to see good things happen this year. At the same time, you don't want them to be too good, because you got to hit on that draft coming up. But it'll be interesting, this game against the 49ers, Matt. Again, I think to string together 2 games of good offense and then to win one would be massive for this team, especially for those young guys who I think are looking for that kind of exhale.
They need something positive.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. At this point, your only win was against the hapless Browns, who just fired their coach, Hugh Jackson. I mean, everybody's so high on the Browns, they have 2 wins. They have 2 wins.
Right.
The only reason that's great is because they had 1 win in the previous 32 games. So let's not pretend like the Raiders, have a legitimate win. It's the Browns. They need something to give them a shot in the arm to get them through this second half of the season, whether it's the Cardinals or the 49ers, which are probably the only 2 legitimate shots they have at winning a game the rest of this season. Hopefully they can find one.
Okay, so let's go with a prediction. You already said you think the Raiders are going to win. Give me a score.
I don't know if I think they're going to win. I think they have a chance at winning this game. But if Nick Mullins starts, then I think I think this is going to be, you're not going to find defense in this game, right? Let's be honest. There's not going to be a whole lot of defense. But if Nick Mullins starts, then you've got an unknown commodity at quarterback, a guy who's never started in the NFL, a smaller guy. Maybe you can get to him a little bit. Maybe you can rattle him. It's Thursday night football. The stage is big. Derek Carr has been on the big stage. He understands what it takes. Maybe you can get things rolling a little bit. I'm going to say, man, I'm going to go 23-13 Raiders.
All right, 23-13. That's not bad. But yeah, and if the Raiders were to lose this game against the 49ers tomorrow and Thursday, I think you might have like 6 guys on that defense retire. Because I wouldn't at halftime. I wouldn't want to walk out of that locker room losing to a third string quarterback who's probably going to have rattling knees and wetting his pants in his first time in an NFL start.
Third string quarterback on a 1-17, no less.
Yeah, unless you're Nathan Peterman, it doesn't get much worse.
God, he's terrible.
He really is terrible, and he's going to start this week. Unbelievable. But I think it's going to be a little more high scoring, believe it or not, only because of that terrible Raiders defense and the ability of the 49ers to maybe move the ball and to perhaps capitalize on some miscues. So I'm going to go with a 26-24 game, and I'm going to have the Raiders win that one. So I'm going to have them win 26-24, and in a close one, but you know, I think one of the things that's going to play a big part of this game, which is not a strength of the Raiders right now, Matt, is special teams. Johnny Townsend is the worst punter in the NFL.
Oh, he's terrible, man.
The fact that he's still on the roster, Hayden seems to believe that it's because he doesn't think Jon Gruden can cut another Reggie McKenzie draft pick without making it look really, really bad for Reggie. So he's keeping him on the roster because Gruden did double down again this week, saying, no, I haven't lost faith in Johnny Townsend. Like, hey, he punted 25 yards in the fourth quarter, and in actuality, that was the biggest play of the game. It ended up being the difference in the game because the Colts went down and scored. So you cannot punt the ball 25 yards in the fourth quarter on your own side of the field. It's just not going to work that way. They addressed the place kicker with Carlson, who I told you on Sunday, I think he's going to be here 5 years. I really do. I think the guy's a really good kicker, and he just got a bad break in Minnesota. I understand why they cut him, but I think he's going to be fine. But Matt, this could end up, a bad punt, a blocked punt, a missed kick. To me, when you have two bad teams playing, that type of thing seems to follow them.
It does, and I'm not quite ready to say the Raiders are going to start scoring because I've got to see it more than once.
Absolutely.
Last week was great, and again, you go back to Cleveland, and that was a 5-turnover game. One of them was a pick six. They got the ball 3 times, I think, inside their own 20. You're going to score points when that kind of stuff happens. So until you see some consistency with this offense, I'm not really ready to say that they're going to score. But this is a game where you feel like they can score. It's just the 49ers are not good, but then again, the Raiders aren't good. So maybe that makes for a really good game.
Well, how about the intangibles? Does the Raider Nation show up down at Levi's? I mean, despite the year, the stadium was not full in Oakland this week, and you can understand why. Right. But do you think Raider Nation comes out in force since it's in the Bay Area?
I think there will be more Raider fans there than 49er fans, not because the Raiders are going to come out in full force, because 49er fans haven't been going to Levi's Stadium since it opened. So they're not going to be there. Raiders fans are going to come down because I think they're just a better fan base in general. So I think you'll see more silver and black there than you do the red and gold. But it's probably going to be a lot of empty seats in there.
I think there will be too, as I believe the ratings will also be very low. The day after Halloween, people are going to have probably some Halloween party hangovers, as well as those of us with kids who've had too much sugar. They're going to be grumpy and bugging the crap out of us. But it should be funny after all that happens. But to me too, I think really, Matt, I something just tells me, I don't have inside information, none of that stuff, none of the quote unquote sources. I just don't think the Raiders are going to play in Oakland next year. So I think this is going to be the last game, the last battle of the Bay, if you will. And it's really too bad that it's between two bad teams, because you'd like to see a really good game against two good teams that really just claw at each other and go down to the end and somebody wins. So that's going to be a little disappointing, don't you think?
Well, that's what we thought we were going to see before the season started. You thought the Raiders were going to be competitive with, like we talked about earlier, the depth we thought they would have over the summer, and then Jimmy Garoppolo and how well he did in the second half of last season coming in. You thought these were going to be two competitive teams. I thought the 49ers were – I thought at this point of the season the Raiders would be the better team.
Yeah.
But I thought the 49ers would win this game just because of the competitive nature of it, being the Battle of the Bay, being in San Francisco, and I figured the 49ers would be around an 8-8 team for the season. It's not the case. I don't know what we're going to get. You don't have all that defensive depth that you thought we were going to have in Oakland. You don't have Jimmy Garoppolo. You've got a very uneven Derek Carr. Who knows what we're going to see in this game?
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but we have football on Thursday, and it's football we care about because it's Raiders football. Matt, dude, thank you so much for being on the podcast again. And, of course, you and I get together on Sunday morning. We get to review the 49er game, and we get to look ahead at the Raiders' next game. So we're going to have a lot of stuff to talk to you guys about 8 to 10 a.m. on CBS Sports Radio, 1140 a.m. in Las Vegas. If you're not in Las Vegas, like a lot of you are, Matt, we've had people from Mexico, people from Ireland, people from England, people from Alabama in this country, people from the East Coast. So we know a lot of people listen to us outside of the market and outside of California. You can do that. Radio.com app for the CBS Sports Radio show as well. We also stream it live on YouTube, so you can watch us and see what jersey we're wearing that day. Now, tonight for Halloween, Matt, I've decided to go as Phil Villapiano. I'm going to color my hair. I'm going to talk like this. And I'm going to go trick-or-treating with my kids tonight. So have fun with your kids tonight, man, and we'll talk to you on Sunday.
Sounds good, man. All
right, that was Matt Gutierrez with Silver and Black today. This is Scott Gulbransen. We're going to end the podcast now. Again, I'm going to plug, please check out silverandblacktoday.com, where you can read the latest and greatest news, not only on the Raiders, but also the relocation to Las Vegas. Always up to date and great content there as well. Make sure you check out the CBS Sports Radio show, 8 to 10 a.m., on Sunday, every Sunday, including this Sunday. You can listen to it on the radio.com app, watch it on YouTube. You can also watch it on Facebook and Twitter. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Silver and Black. Gosh, I should say Twitter again. Twitter, Silver Black, the number 2, and Day. That's going to do it for us. We appreciate you guys being here. As always, thank you for your support. Without you, we don't exist. And we will talk to you next time. We'll talk to you on Sunday, everybody. See you later, Raider Nation.